Hello. Thank you. Hello. Maybe I can try that again. Hello. So, I'm very happy to be here and to have the honor of sort of breaking open the space with you, because now we begin. And I am interested in sharing with you the journey that I'm going to take you on and inviting you to engage with me along the way. That's totally optional. You can be passive and I can keep talking, but there are ways in which I've also made space for you to come aboard, if you will. I think this word maker is as important as the word festival, that we are all together making spaces, making experiences, making up what we're doing as we go. We find our way forward together, and we learn sort of, there's an old African proverb that to stumble is not to fall, but to move forward faster. So in that spirit, I actually, here's what's gonna happen. Somebody's going to mute their phone. Everybody else who forgot to mute their phone will also mute their phone. We are going to have an interactive opportunity, which I'll share a bit about in a second. Then I am going to give a talk, but the talk is focused on this notion that we are all learning together. So it's not that interesting to me to come give a fancy talk with pretty pictures of Burning Man and say, we are so special. It is much more interesting to me to look at Burning Man with curiosity about what has happened there and what are the ways in which exactly what you are doing is exactly what we are doing, and how we can interrogate those things and learn together. It's a matter of scale. It's not a matter of intent, right? We probably share a close and common set of intentions about the outcomes and the benefits of our work to the world at large. So I've broken the conversation down into 4 areas. One is called Little Things Add Up Over Time. One is called The Rituals We Keep. The next is called The Spaces We Shape. And the last section is called Making a Lasting Impression and Succession Planning. The reason I'm naming those things now is because I suspect you will each have stories that relate to the topic that I will go through. And so if you wanted to hold questions until the Q&A that will follow, you can do that. But I will also along the way say, has this brought something up for you, or is there something you want to share? Because sometimes that impulse in the moment is worth capturing in the moment if you feel it's so bold. And then, as I alluded to, we will also have a short section at the end, 15 to 30 minutes, depends if I go lickety-split through my presentation or if I end up relaxing and getting down a meandering path, but we'll have time for Q&A at the end, which will be supported by Maureen. So before we go forward, I also want to thank Carl and David for supporting me to getting to this moment. And I'd like to thank Rebecca and Kevin and Maureen for opening us up this morning and hosting us on the whole. So now I would like to invite my new friend Teresia up to the stage because we are going to sing. Now, as you know, singing is not a forced function. You can choose to abstain, but in the spirit of being together and breaking open this moment and sort of making this collegial, it is our hope that you will actually learn a song, which I will be learning with you, and we will, it's a round, and we will successfully enjoy the sound of ourselves together.
Viva, viva la musica, viva, viva la musica.
That was brilliant. Or I've been told that you say things are grand. That was grand. Wow. And I don't know if you noticed, but during the time when you were singing, there were a series of photos running that were pictures of your festivals. You are the reason we are here. And that was freaking brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, so as I said, my themes for discussion and sharing little things add up over time. The rituals we keep, the places we shape, leaving a lasting impression, and succession planning. And the reason I actually wanted to start with this moment of singing was, one, to warm the room and to feel ourselves together, but also to think a little bit about, as festival makers, we are often insulated from the vulnerability that participants and artists actually feel. We take risks, of course. We don't know for sure if people will come. We don't know for sure if we'll get the donations that we need. There are many, many elements to the work that we do that are unpredictable and that we have to rise to the occasion to solve for. But at the same time, we also have these kinds of armaments, if you will. We have clipboards, we have radios, we have a place to be, we have a role to take, and in that sense, many of us actually are somewhat insulated if we don't also have our own sort of outside interests as artists or participants. We are kept a bit apart from what it feels like to step into that unknown and uncomfortable and awkward space that an artist and a participant will actually experience when they engage with us. And so just even to have a moment of uncertainty together, to have that moment of kind of like, whoa, not quite sure where this is going, and what is that second line? I can't quite hear it. I was having trouble with it too. These kinds of things of bringing ourselves to the precipice and taking the leap off and into the unknown is so much of what it is that we're creating for other people. And then on the other side of it, they have the success of an experience they will remember, or a connection that they made, or a new way of seeing the place where they already live. So this, in many ways, was the intent for me in beginning in that way. And I'm wondering if anyone is willing or interested in speaking to how that felt for you. We have mics.
Self-conscious?
Self-conscious. Mm-hmm.
Fun.
Fun.
Therapeutic.
Say again?
Therapeutic.
Good to be together.
It's changed.
Quite human in making like a mistake, or it's like two people I don't know, so it's kind of nice.
Being human and between two people you don't know, making a mistake. Yeah, exactly. Irish, you felt Irish? Childish. Together we're stronger. Was that you? Or did you raise your hand to say something? Say.
Therapeutic first.
Therapeutic?
Together we're stronger.
And together we're stronger. I apologize. Apparently I don't quite understand the Irish accent. I actually my name is Kim Cook, as was said before, but when I was born, my name was Kim McNally. So like all Irish Americans, I think I know something about Ireland without ever having been here. Oh, yay. I'm really, really happy to be here, and thank you for making me welcome. I did make notes for myself in case I lost my mind and wasn't quite comfortable up here to help me remember what it was that I wanted to say. Because if I wrote down exactly what I was going to say, I find that I entirely freeze on stage. So I'm sort of doing a little bit of a high wire act, and I invite you to support me and wish me well, because I'd like to do well for you. So the first part of this conversation is things add up over time. And I invite you to be curious about what does this truck, can you see, is the resolution good for you on the pictures? Okay. It's a little fuzzy from here, but good, I'm glad you can see. What does this truck have to do with Burning Man? And I'll come back to that at the end. So as was mentioned by Maureen, in 1986, Burning Man began when Larry Harvey and his friend Jerry James decided to build an effigy as a way of doing a family outing with Larry's child at the time. That turned into something pretty fantastic and immediately sort of attracted an audience, which meant that we had to go to the desert. I myself joined Burning Man 7.5 years ago, so when I say we, I say that in a sort of generous and generalized kind of way, because I, in fact, was a little bit scared to go to Burning Man, even though I knew it was happening at the time. Not in '86, but in the late '90s when I was first invited. This is the city today, and 80,000 people come. We don't tend to refer to it as a festival, even though we know that we belong inside of the greater community of festivals. We tend to refer to it as an event. We also call it Black Rock City or Temporary City. And this is our city superimposed on a map of Galway. So from a few people on the beach to 8,000 volunteers who build the city every year. We're in the desert. We're actually based in San Francisco, California, but the event takes place in the Nevada Black Rock Desert. We first begin to build our city in early August, and we are completely out of the city by the end of September. The 10 principles, which Maureen referred to, is one of the first places I want to make the point that Burning Man is a learning by doing culture. It is not really that the 10 principles are any kind of an edict. We are not recruiting, we are not proselytizing, we are not trying to tell people how to lead their lives. In fact, what happened is that after a number of years, people asked, how do I do this in my own place? I want to take this home. I want to recreate this experience. How might I do that? And so the founder, Larry Harvey, really spent time thinking about and observing what it was that was happening in the community. So Burning Man is very much about when you get to a big, wide, open, blank space and you throw a bunch of creative people who are makers and doers together, what is it that they co-create? And the behaviors that he observed became what are now the 10 principles. So this is a distinction of importance, I think, because we're ever evolving as an emergent learning organization. We're not one where it's sort of like we lay down the rules, this is how it goes. And in fact, what I have found is that we're often, and I'll talk about this a bit in succession planning, now working to address that the systems we've created were created for conditions that no longer exist. So thinking about the themes of this Festival Makers Conference around innovation and evolution and how do we collaborate and think about a future that is perhaps unpredictable and that requires us to build resilience, adaptability, and flexibility moving forward. This is a view of the city at night. One thing is we have mutant vehicles, usually about 450 or so are registered by our Department of Mutant Vehicles. And those are classified as vehicles that really have been so modified that they wouldn't be street legal. And the ones that are running around the desert at night have lights on them. So one thing that becomes very difficult is to actually orient yourself because the city is swirling around you at night. And often, you know, Burning Man is sort of thought of as this place where everybody's running around with blinky lights and flashing costumes. But in fact, that's also a matter of safety because you want to be seen by that roving mutant vehicle and not squashed in the desert. Our mission, Burning Man, was initially sort of a free-for-all of friends and people coming out of things like the Cacophony Society in San Francisco and other, the non-salon group, the many different people who were part of the sort of interactive, performative, creative scene in San Francisco in the 80s and 90s. In the early 90s, they formed, or mid-90s, they formed an LLC with 6 co-founders. Larry Harvey is the original founder, and then Marion Goodell and Will Roger, Crimson Rose, Michael, and Harley K. Dubois. I hope I just said 6 names. They became the 6 co-founders, but when they got to around 2012, they sold out for the first time. And suddenly they were faced with thinking around, how do you curate community if everybody can't just roll up and come? What does it mean to institutionalize, and how will we live on past our deaths? And that's when they became a nonprofit, sort of between 2012 and 2014. And this was named as specifically the mission of the organization. So that's one little things add up over time bit is the event itself and the mission and the 10 principles and becoming a nonprofit. Another is the art, which is something that Burning Man is quite well known for, are these monumental pieces. And the point of this slide a bit is to say, yes, Burning Man has given funding over time. Initially, it was a small amount of money to support the materials for artists who are already coming and bringing their work. And it's important to note that one of the core traditions and principles of Burning Man is that of gifting. So when you come to Burning Man, everything that you experience once you've bought a ticket is just a part of the offering of all of the other participants. Burning Man is creating an infrastructure, a platform, a space, but in fact, the participants are bringing the experience, including the artists. And at the same time, as things got bigger and more sophisticated, the organization itself began to make contributions to the artists. What I'll also point out is of the 1,270 artists and makers that have been funded since 1999, you can see that 6,180 altogether have contributed their gifts and made art for the event, meaning that the organization has only funded 20% of the artists, and in fact, rarely funds over 40 to 50% of the cost. So there's a few things to think about here. One is, how did it get so monumental then? What does it mean to co-create the work, which is what most of the artists do? It's the collective offering. Also, though, that even with this, what has added up to a substantial amount of money since 1999, in increments was smaller amounts of money, just portions of the work, and yet what has happened is that we've created a form of art movement around co-creative monumental artwork, which indeed ended up on exhibition at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in 2018. So it's interesting to note that giving what you can and supporting with what you have to support the artists often leads to substantial change in the field, as well as incredible work and careers for the artists. This is a work by Zach Coffin. It's called Temple of Gravity. Each of those weigh a couple of tons of free swinging stones, and then he creates a fire pit with French onion soup at midnight each night. This work, and I just wanted to show you a few of the sort of what I mean by monumental co-created work. This is a piece by Rebecca Waits called Church Trap. You can sort of get the point of this, I think. It actually had also a full-scale organ that you could play inside. And up until this moment, when she made this work, Rebecca had been working purely in 2D as a painter. And after making this work, with the help of many friends and loved ones, she's gone on to have a much more substantial career in the arts. This is a long-standing favorite of mine. It went actually into Las Vegas for a number of years. It's called Big Rig Jig by Mike Ross. And I think that one of the things that happens at Burning Man is that people who are not artists come to Burning Man and they see this cool stuff and they roll up and they think, what can I do? Which is another thing that I think as festival makers often happens, is we're enabling the imagination of what is possible. And at Burning Man, we don't make any distinction between artist and maker. Doer and not doing is more of a distinction for us. So there's no actual curation of the art, and yet at the same time, as I said, even though we only provide a portion of funding to a portion of the artists, what we provide universally is capacity support. So engineering, heavy equipment, budget review, helping people promote their work in terms of finding funding and the efforts that they're making. And so even when the financial contribution is not something you can completely providing an understanding that you are supporting the evolution of the work of the artist is equally important. But everything that is at Burning Man is not ginormous. And so I wanted to share this piece, which is called Let There Be Light. And it was a gumball machine with blinky lights inside. So just in case you didn't bring your blinky lights in the desert, you could go get one from the gumball machine and be seen at night and not hit by a mutant vehicle. Other kinds of things that have added up over time from the artwork is that we've moved into public spaces. And so this is a piece called Sonic Runway by Rob Jensen and Warren Trezevant, which is now a 7-year permanent installation in front of the San Jose City Hall. So a lot of the work that I do as the Director of Creative Initiatives is live at this intersection between what is happening in the desert and how it might translate into other contexts. And one of the key things for me is that I say that objects in and of themselves don't convey culture, but when you animate them, when you activate them, when they're interactive and people can participate, now you're having a cultural experience. And this Sonic Runway is actually based on the Doppler effect. So if you make a sound at one end, it travels as a light signal through this tunnel of gates from one end to the other. So in San Jose, we've had opera singers and taiko drummers and fashion shows and weddings and debuting of new soccer stars, football stars, and so forth. So it really has become a part of the community space. And the city hall is actually a really gorgeous building, but they hadn't been able to activate the public square until they put a piece of art there. Okay, another project that came out of Burning Man, and this is something that I'm hoping that you can interrogate for yourselves, is to begin to think about the things that you're already doing that may have residual or other kinds of impacts that you might not have anticipated. And in this case, it was the use of and learning how to build things and use heavy equipment that came into play when Hurricane Katrina happened, which was just as people were leaving the Black Rock Desert in 2005. And so all of a sudden you have all these people who for a number of years now have been building temporary shelter, have been using heavy equipment, have used to lugging all their water and supplies and being radically self-reliant, thinking and having empathy and compassion and concern for what was happening in Louisiana. And basically, people collected money, left the desert, and went for 6 months to help with the restoration efforts in the Gulf of Mexico. And so over the years since then, we have 458 projects reported, and more than 7,000 volunteers and people doing work in community resilience and disaster relief around the world under the title of Burners Without Borders. So it turns out when you make festivals, when you make events, when you make spaces, people learn things, and those things translate back into their homes. And maybe it's not as epic as going to the Gulf Coast and restoring and building and creating community there. Often it's just smaller things, beach cleanups and other contributions to the community that are important. We also, one of the principles you may have noticed is leaving no trace. And so everything you bring in, you pack out. We have no trash cans at all at Burning Man, except ones that are turned into little art objects like this. And we have a MOOP map that we create. This one is miraculously almost entirely green, which is not true to form. So I'm not sure how this particular one ended up here. Oh, 2019 was a very good year. Apparently we're feeling very responsible. But one of the things is that we can't have more than one square foot, basically the equivalent of 1 inch of leftover things in a 1-gallon bag, like on that scale, but of the whole city when we're inspected. We're on public property, the Bureau of Land Management. So our Playa Restoration team created this Matter Out of Place, or MOOP map, so that you will see if your camp is not respecting the leaving no trace. And no one wants to see their camp in red published after the event. So there's this quality of also positive peer reinforcement that came out of that. And now, fast forward to 2 or 3 years ago, we made this public sustainability pledge that we're working our way through with solar power and camps that are completely run on solar, and thinking through how to be regenerative and how to be carbon negative by 2030. I'm feeling a little bit on a roll. It feels like you're very present. Is there anyone who's interested in sharing a story about how things have added up over time for you? Not so much. All right, so hold on to that thought. And then the truck, do you remember the truck and the trailer that I had at the first slide? So what that is it's a mobile resource unit that's a part of Burners Without Borders. And it's taken out to refugee spaces and places of transients. And it's a cultural first responder container. And inside of it is an entirely mobile makerspace with sewing machines and CNC cutters and drills and hammers, because one of the things that the leader of Burners Without Borders, Christopher Breedlove, learned over time is that it isn't so much about going in and trying to rescue or save people as it is going in with the resources so that people can do the things they want to do for themselves. Right? Humans are powerful, but it's about the resources, it's about being available and making the tools available. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the rituals we keep. Probably you have rituals, maybe you know that and you do that very intentionally, or perhaps you just have them and you haven't named them as rituals. But it is my sort of my hypothesis, I guess, or my point of view is that when we're clear about the rituals that we keep, about the way we open a space, even the way that we sang together, how that brings people together, when we honor and create traditions that people can hold with each other, we're also evoking something very personal in particular for the people who are participating with us. And we're sort of shaping the energy, if you will, of the experience. So at Burning Man, stickers is a big one, as are patches and ways of acknowledging volunteers. Another one is something we call Golden Spike. So each year, the man gets built on a center point of the city, and the rest of the city is created around it, like a clock, and then there's open playa. So if you think of the man as being at the center of a clock, and then 12 o'clock would be up from the man behind his head, if he's a he, although we think he's ambiguous, gender non-binary for sure, even though we say Burning Man. And then 6 o'clock goes down through the center of the city, and then we map the rest of the city accordingly. So each year we have this ritual of the Golden Spike, where we go out and we put the spike in, and even if you're not there in the Black Rock Desert, we all sort of typically tend to pause and celebrate the moment that the city begins. Then we build a perimeter fence. Now, a perimeter fence could be built by a machine that goes around and sort of pounds rebar into the ground, but instead a team of people go out and do that together, and they shape and form the outer perimeter of the city. And one of the things that I learned when I was working in the office of Burning Man is, like, as things are beginning to galvanize and the momentum is growing and we're all working really hard and things are getting a little frayed around the edges, and this woman, Rosalie, said to me, she said, when the perimeter fence is done, the energy will settle down. And it really did. There is something about containing space and understanding where the container and where the edges are that seals a thing. And that is done by this crew of people who you can see feel very good about themselves as they manage to get that rebar into the ground. It's also worth noting that we can't really go more than 6 inches deep because we're in a prehistoric lake bed and you have to preserve the natural environment. So we have some real challenges there. Another ritual from Burning Man is called the Lamplighters. This started in 1993, where people just set out some lamps along the path to the man. Now they set out 1,000 lamps. This is totally self-organized by volunteers who have created their own sort of ritual around gathering, about what they're wearing, about this sort of how they create these poles that the lamps hang from, and then they go out and hang them across the city each evening at dusk, and then bring them back in again at dawn. And then, of course, our biggest ritual is the burn. And this is one of our founders, Crimson Rose. She's lighting El Diablo. This will be a fire that burns from Monday of the event week until Saturday night when we burn the man. She lights it using a prism, so that she can sort of channel the energy from the sun to ignite the fire. But she always brings a lighter with her, just in case. Just in case. She also is the person who sponsors and supports. She's sort of our first fire dancer. She's the protectress of the man. She's very clear that we're not burning the man, we're releasing the man, is the way that she thinks about it. She protects the sense of ritual and collective action related to that. And part of that is through the Fire Conclave, which brings together fire dancers and fire spinners from around the world that create the inner circle for when we burn the man. So that is, of course, our largest and best known burn, is the releasing of the man. And part of the role that I have today, since we lost our founder, Larry Harvey, in 2018, is that I get to art direct and animate the art that's here at the man in concert and collaboration with Crimson Rose, Stuart Harvey, who writes our theme, and Harley K. Dubois, one of the other co-founders and our chief cultural officer. Okay, so this is a good moment for me to take a drink of water, and I'm going to try asking you another question and see what happens. So we have another ritual. It's called a murder dinner, and I'm wondering if anybody can imagine what that is. I think it might be very useful to you to know what a murder dinner is, which is why I'm bringing it up. No takers?
Is it after the festival?
Is it after the festival?
Yeah.
No. Any other voluntary thoughts?
Is it at a board meeting?
Much closer, actually. I love it. Because there were 6 co-founders, and many of you, yes, like a board meeting or multiple stakeholders, you know that thing that keeps coming up and can't get resolved? Yeah. You can never figure out who's going to win, which stakeholder is right, and it just won't go away. The 6 co-founders created this ritual called a murder dinner, and they would get together and they would debate and argue that thing as long as they had to until they made a decision. And then after that, the idea was dead or not, right? It got murdered or not. And then they weren't allowed to bring it up again. So they just, that's it. It's done. We're not going to fight over that anymore. Something else that feels really important to me to think about together is the spaces that we shape. And You know, I've thought a lot about this interrogation of public space. Like, how do we think about public space? Because while this is a very formal environment, it's very structured, right? It's not particularly my most comfortable unless I'm really like in a play or something. Like this sets up this kind of dynamic where you're there, I'm here. Like if I'm lucky, you're gonna talk to me when I ask you a question. Like there's no mingling, there's no circulating. You know, you're confined to your chair in a particular way and you only have so much room between you and the next person. So this space is very well defined. But often when we're doing festival work, or even, you know, site-specific performance or public installation, we're dealing with a larger public realm or an unmediated space or maybe an old industrial building that we're taking over. Like there's a number of ways that we're thinking about space where we have to be observant about that space, about its possibilities, and then what we're going to do there. I feel very strongly that everything we do says something about us and that we have to be incredibly consistent in the way we apply the work that we do and our thinking to the entire experience. And I've done a little bit of experimenting. I went once to the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, used to have a summer camp for arts leaders. And each year there would be a different theme for the summer camp. And the year I went was the social impact summer camp. And so we all got to kind of pick a project in little cohort teams to suggest a hypothesis of what kind of impact or outcome we would have if we did a particular thing. And it was a way of learning about indicators and proxy indicators and impact and all those things. My particular group chose something which was about interrupting a path. So we used colored tape and other things to create a sort of a path within a pathway in public space to see if people would interact with it. And it totally changed the way people walked through this public plaza. Like kids played with it, people jumped in and out of it, people took selfies, they kissed each other. Like all kinds of things started to happen just by putting colored tape on the ground. I will also digress away from Burning Man for a moment and in the direction of Social Impact Camp to also say that I learned something very important there that I've used again and again when trying to help people think about what is a proxy indicator, right? When we're talking about outcomes, because if you can't prove causation, you still want to look for things that give you the sense or the indication that you're actually having the impact that you want. The group that had the most entertaining hypothesis was that Deadheads, Grateful Dead fans, have closer social connections than most people do. And the way that they measured it is they went to a Deadhead tribute concert and they counted how many times people passed a joint in the parking lot. That was their proxy indicator. Also something that's very easy to grok. And because I've digressed now completely off track from my outline, I will tell you something else, just in case you're interested in things like strategic criteria filters and logic models. There's one that I also use for Burning Man because thinking about strategic criteria filters is also very challenging. But my first year at Burning Man, when we were reviewing the art that was applications for funding, the guy who's in charge of fire art safety, his name is Dave X, said to me, "Kim, we have a rule against flying, flaming, untethered objects." I was like, okay, I have a really cool job if you need a rule like that. But it's also a strategic criteria filter, because if you ask yourself, is it flying, is it flaming, is it untethered, then if the answer to those questions are yes, then we don't do it. But the next question I asked Dave was like, but wait a second, what about that flying, flaming piano from a trebuchet that I saw last year at the event? And he's like, oh, well, that was really cool, and it helped us figure out playa restoration techniques. And I was like, oh, okay. So the way a great strategic criteria filter works is you can ask yourself a series of questions that guide you in most cases, except when mission sort of trumps it. So it has to be flexible enough to be deviated from. And at Burning Man, that's the example I use for that. But coming back to the spaces that we shape, my point is that we are intentional about the choices that we make when we set something up in space, and that it's much more than where does this go, where does that go, and where do people check in. It is about the kind of experience that we're creating for people. One of the most prominent examples of that at Burning Man is the temple, which is built each year as a place where people leave remembrances. And sometimes that's related to death, but it's more often or not related to transition or change in life. Could be a divorce, could be a loss of a pet, could be a profound change in your own identity or life. And people leave these mementos inside of the temple, and we burn that on the Sunday night of the event just before it closes. And unlike the Saturday night event, which is quite exuberant, this is done typically in silence as things burn. And while we haven't been in Ireland, I understand that David Best would very much like to do a temple in Dublin. We have been in North Ireland, where a temple was done with the help of 65 organizations brought together by Artichoke Trust, who you may know, Helen Marriage, was built and burned in Derry. One of the other things about placing the art is that I like, this is obviously not prescriptive, but I propose to you that making up a mythology about the journey of the art, or it can be the performers. One time I did this with the Philadelphia Zoo with 7 stages and artists. And it's how you associate and how you make a story for yourself. This isn't necessarily a part of the promotional pack or the press release. Sometimes it's very helpful because you can give a patron or a donor or a friend a sort of inside look at your choices, which also makes them feel included and special. But it's really an internal, gut level sort of choice making. And so when I used to work with Katie Hazard, who now leads the art team, she led the art team then, but we worked together on thinking about the art placement. This is the art map. We would start by asking ourselves, what is the first piece that we are setting and what is the intention around it? And we would make up a sort of mashup mythology, right? Like whether that was Celtic or whether that was Greek or whether that was Jungian, but what was the journey we were imagining that people might take through the city and through the experience of the art? And then we end up filling things in. And what I have found time and again about being intentional with the choices that we make is that they don't have to be visible to other people, and yet it adds a dimension of feeling to the experience that's just really ineffable and not nameable, but actually has impact. And we think about that with the placement of the art. We also shape space by having zones inside of Burning Man, one of which is Kidsville, and it's a part of the city where nothing motorized can go through, and it's 150 camps dedicated to people who are coming to Burning Man with their children, and it's a very clear and safe space for those families to be. And it's a super cool place for kids, I'm just telling you. Like, where else can your kid eat ice cream for breakfast and play with a flamethrower in the afternoon? And be safe. Speaking of safety, we also have over 800 volunteers. Again, this is very much generated from the community, by the community, for the community. They call themselves rangers. They're sort of mediators, conflict resolution types of people. They can help support someone who's having a difficult time in the desert. And there are many, many ways people can have a difficult time. It's just a clear reality check in terms of your internal resources. And if you're unbalanced, and that's not necessarily because you're altered by some other substance, it can be because you're dehydrated, it can be because it's just very overstimulating, it can be because you met someone and you fell in love, or it can be because you came with your lover and you fell out of love. Like, many things happen at Burning Man. Or just because you're freaking out because you didn't realize your camp was next door to the roller skate disco derby, which goes on all night, and you're tired of that music. So we have rangers. This happens to be a picture I noticed when I was going through this, since it was already, the slide deck was already here and handed over to the production team, and I didn't want to like swap something out. This is all dudes, you will notice, but really the rangers are not all dudes. They are all mixed in a variety of ways, but they're always available in the city. They're always circulating. And then the last thing that's also that they provide is a bit of a buffer zone between law enforcement and participants, so that they address and resolve issues and we can keep some distance, because we do have the Federal Bureau of Land Management Rangers. We have the state also has people there from law enforcement, as does the county. So we have a fairly substantial law enforcement presence, and having this layer of rangers who create a safe space as they go and sort of evoke a sense of safety for people while they're there in the space. And they also have a zone. They have a place, like a tranquil place, where they can also take people if they just need to be in quiet and in peace. So the last section of my talk, because I'm guessing you don't want to tell me examples of your shaping space, we'll leave it for the Q&A. Maureen, we have an assignment together. But is to this notion of leaving a lasting impression and succession planning. So the first thing to talk about is rage quitting versus sage quitting. Most of us probably function heavily through the work of volunteers and our regular staff, who we call all our volunteers and year-round employees are staff. Everyone is staff. There's no distinction between those two sets of populations, because there's no making Black Rock City without the contributions and talents of everyone. And people get caught up in it, right? It's their identities. They're giving a substantial portion of their time, a lot of heart and passion, often money, to come to the desert to help build the city, to be a part of the Rangers, or to create Kidsville, or to be a temple guardian, or a lamplighter, or any of the many numbers of ways we have rituals and roles for our volunteer team. And what happens is that people stay past the time they need to be there. They just don't want to leave. They don't want to leave behind their legacy. They're afraid somebody else will mess it up. They're afraid that it can't run without them. And this becomes our work, right? Like, we have to be able to observe that a person has reached that place. And so one of the things we've been learning a lot about at Burning Man is how to make it safe and comfortable for people to move into a sage quitting space instead of a rage quitting space, and to ennoble this idea of passing it on, of letting go. Often that's just by finding another role, but sometimes it's by graduating, it's by becoming an alumni. And for us, that means paying attention to honoring alumni status for our volunteers. We have a series of patches that you get after so many years of service. If you're an alumni, you still will have access to directed group sales, because our tickets can be difficult to get. You're acknowledged, you're still included in mailing lists that give you inside information about what is happening. You're invited to special events at other times of the year, and sort of encouraged to honor your own legacy by being willing to let go of it. And then there's the larger organization. I mentioned at the beginning that, when I joined Burning Man, I really observed that many of the systems that were in place were created for conditions that no longer exist. And I can say universally across the nonprofit sector in the United States, there are challenges with aging infrastructure and underinvested, because we're all working at capacity, we're all scrappy, we're all figuring out how to do the work we do with sort of, foregone wages and volunteers and discounted rents and whatever it is we can do to keep it together. And over time, you end up with debt, even if it's just your messy database, right? It's like, it just adds up over time. Little things add up over time in good ways, but also in ways that make more of a burden for us. And so when we start to think about succession planning and we start to think about an organization that lives beyond us and beyond our time and beyond the current leaders and the founders of the organization, for Burning Man right now, this is a very present question. So what we're doing, which may or may not be of useful information to you, but which I want to share openly about, is thinking about how we consolidate our information. So we have many brilliant project managers around Burning Man, many of whom have innovated their own way of keeping track of things. So one of the things that's happening now is an office of project management so that people can integrate and to build templates that are clear about how we do things in a more orchestrated fashion, which is not to become conformist. There's no sort of one way, dictate around how we do things, but it's about this consolidating of information and then turning that into standard operating procedures. But if there's one thing that we know, you can create standard operating procedures for today, and then the conditions will change again, and they could become sort of, you can't have them just be relics, they need to be lasting. And the thing that's lasting is culture. And the things that we want for the preservation of Burning Man isn't to just hold fast to tradition, but still to be able to rely on the culture and the values. So while we're collecting these standard operating procedures, the other thing that we're doing is we're collecting the stories. The stories like the murder dinner, right? The stories of like why we do the perimeter fence by hand instead of cheaper, easier, faster with a machine. We're writing down why and how the choices we make are made that are in the sort of furtherance of the culture that we believe is making a contribution to the lives of those who participate in it, and to the extent that we are also having a ripple effect around the world. These are the things that we want to collect and to put together as what we're calling a cultural roadmap, a series of stories that can be sort of data mined for direction setting in the future, at least as a point of reference. And then finally, we're rethinking about governance and decision making as a highly collaborative organization where a lot of people have to be involved in socializing and making a decision. We're asking ourselves questions about what are our risk and trust thresholds, right? In order to make a decision or to have a distributed set of decision makers at a collaborative level, understanding very clearly where the risks lie. And those risks include things like money and legal and risk liability, like insurance people think about. It also involves cultural risk. We don't want to be a city of Instagram posers, right? We want to continue to be a city of participatory, giving, making, co-creating citizens at the Black Rock Desert. And so thinking through the cultural risks and where do they lie is as much a question for us today as the questions of, the financial thresholds of risk. And similarly, thinking about trust, like trust as in if it's not precedent setting, not so much risk, and probably we can trust that it will be okay. If it's tactical, probably not so much to be concerned about. Different people will have different ways, but they'll still get it done. But, there's also things like how experienced is the person, what level of understanding do they show over time around the culture. And so we're in this kind of very fluid conversation at the moment at the leadership level about where are our risk and trust thresholds, and coming back to this rage and sage quitting, what are the things we need to surface around where people feel less than comfortable, where people are afraid that they will be left out or they won't be remembered or their contribution won't be valued, and how does that add to a loss of trust and people not being so willing to let go. And so what kinds of conversations and systems and rituals, if you will, can we put into place that help people feel sort of held together in a way that supports the future of Burning Man and the culture that is derived from that. So with that, I will share this little video and then we will move into the Q&A. I think I have to, yep. Wow, I'm so pleased to be here with you, and I hope that I will get to see you at some point in the desert. Maybe without me clicking all the way back to the slides, can you just go back and put up the first slide as a background slide for us, rather than that? Or do you want me to just go? There we go.
Great.
Right, and
Well done.
Marina's
Great.
here to support whatever happens
Well
next.
done. Was fun. Thank you. Thank you. You want to take us to where you're comfortable, Ken?
I can sit in the wherever you like.
Wherever.
How about?
Well, thank you so much. I know that was incredibly inspiring, and it's just fantastic, the range of issues that you covered. It was just absolutely gorgeous. I'm in complete awe of everything that you do. I have questions, but I want to, we've only got limited time. So does anybody have a question that they'd, there we
have
go.
a half
So
an hour, yes?
Yeah, we've got just half an hour. So
and we don't have to take the whole time, so people
Brilliant.
have some transition.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. So somebody here, great.
So from what you said and from the video and from my knowledge of Burning Man, I've been to most festivals in Europe and in Ireland, but I haven't been to the Burning Man yet. There's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of kind of sports influence, but I'm interested to know, I'm all about transforming healthcare. I've been doing that, won multiple awards. If they were going to diagnose me, and they won't, it'll be Asperger's and ADHD. I've uncovered how to minimise the challenges and enhance the strengths, and through innovative practice, that's what I've been doing in multiple countries and through multiple careers, and I've walked in many people's shoes. And my purpose of being here today is to transform healthcare via festivals, because I use creativity, holistic and sports kind of approaches more than medical. I'm currently an OT. But for Burning Man, I presume there's lots of holistic practitioners that come to Birmingham, but is there a movement towards using their transformational healing, which is something I also do, to actually affect a very positive healthcare change on everyone who attends Burning Man?
And can you, this is a general request, not just for you, but if you don't mind introducing your name and organization when you ask a question, just so we all kind of can meet each other.
Okay. So my name is Maria Rocket. I'm currently an OT with the Waterford South City Children's Disability Network team, but I won't be there much longer. I'll be launching my own sole trader business and charity foundation, then multiple businesses. I've been gathering local and national organisations together for my cause for years, and in the last few months it's gone way faster and bigger than ever before, and it's amazing. And I suppose the knowledge I've gained will not just transform healthcare in Ireland, it will transform healthcare globally, and I'm willing to do lots of journal articles for evidence-based research, because I'm all about evidence-based research in everything I've done. But my primary interest is children with complex needs, and then secondary to that is adults with complex needs. And I'd like to transform healthcare via festivals, but I'm just interested to know, with the movement and all the kind of, and there's a lot of healing goes on in Birmingham, but is there a more concentrated movement with holistic practitioners and transformational healing to actually kind of solve the medical conditions and physical and mental of people who attend Burning Man?
Okay, I will do my best to answer your question. I'm going to ask you to hand the mic back to the runner so that they're poised to hand to the next person, and then to say that I don't know that there's something specifically organized in the way that you're talking about. One of the things that is a big emphasis with Burning Man is harm reduction. So there's a lot of thought and process put into sort of the health and care of people who are in attendance who may not be experiencing it. You mentioned some neurodivergent types of diagnoses, and you do end up with a lot of people at Burning Man that can become overstimulated, and so creating safe spaces, calm spaces, ways for people to manage to their own experience is something that we have pretty sophisticated support networks that are organized by volunteers, and then we also have sort of occupational medicine there, holistic treatment there, and we have a full hospital on site, as well as first aid clinics distributed in other points around the city. There's also a lot of people who are looking into the sort of therapeutic practices of psychedelics, who are people who come to Burning Man. That's not a particular area of interest or practice for me, but it is something that I think is happening. And then I've been very interested because there's a sort of group, they call themselves the Burning Nerds, and they're looking at all kinds of things that are more on an academic level related to Burning Man, some of which have to do with, for example, Paul Romer, who is a prize-winning economist, came and looked at the building of temporary cities and how we map our city as a way to create resilience. And then there's a woman whose name is Nicole, but I can't think of her last name at the moment, who does neurodivergent design for machines like ATM machines and other machines that people have to utilize. And so a lot of people test their ideas and prototype things inside of Burning Man, but that's not necessarily, I think, in the way that you're thinking, where the population who attends Burning Man, there's some sort of process around their health transformation. One of the things we also think about, coming back to proxy indicators, is that the most commonly used phrase is that I went to Burning Man and it changed my life. And so, trying to understand what are the indications that someone's life has changed is something that we're working to unpack a little better. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question?
Hi.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. My name's Little John Nee, and I'm a performer and writer, and totally blown away by your speech, your talk, your sharing, and I don't even know if I can articulate in response to it because I'm in awe of it. Over the years, I've never been to Burning Man, but it's always, aesthetically, I've always been inspired by it. And to hear you speak as well about the organisation and that kind of benign anarchy and being informed by non-conformist ways of going about it, is so inspiring. One thing I was just wondering, though, when something happens like the pandemic, how did you respond to that?
Thank you. Where are you?
Yeah, I can't see you.
Disembodied
In your
voice,
head.
Johnny. Well, you gotta love a question that starts with, I'm blown away by what you said. Because talking is a bit of an out-of-body experience, and I never quite end up the way I thought I might go. So thank you for that support and reassurance that I didn't entirely blow it. In terms of the pandemic, it was really interesting. Of course, the moment came upon us very swiftly, just like everyone else. And in the United States, I think two large indicators that things were really shutting down was the NBA canceling the National Basketball Association canceling the season, and a very, very well-regarded and large event in Austin, Texas called South by Southwest canceling. And so those things happened proximate to our own decision to not use the language that we were canceling so much as to say that we were going virtual. And as it happens, I was hired at Burning Man as the Director of Art and Civic Engagement. I was leading 7 teams. And in September of 2019, I had asked if I might change the relationship to the organization somewhat. I wanted to be continuing to pursue the way in which I had been doing these kinds of institutional partnerships and creative efforts, and a little less responsible for budgets for, $5 million and 7 teams or whatever. And so we had just moved a lot of things off of my plate, and I got to be side by side with the leadership team and the CEO at the time of the pandemic and deciding that we would go virtual. And so there were a few things that I think our CEO was just really leading us in a very, transformative kind of way, being very clear that we were not going to go to the desert early on, and then that we were going to be virtual. It wasn't that we had any idea how to do that, but I had been doing some creative directing with a studio in Montreal called Moment Factory. And so I understood what was happening in digital interactives and gaming and social virtual space. And so I got the opportunity to produce the virtual burn, which we did with 10 partners, all different digital platforms, all different expressions of what social virtual space looks like. And I think that at the moment, it's very important that we come together in person. And I also think we'll probably investigate hybridity, especially thinking about your speaker coming later, Romy, and sustainability and not flying places. And so how do social virtual spaces get us off of the kind of fixed to the screen Zoom experience that can be deadening over time and into things that are more dynamic. So we put a lot of energy into the exploration with these 10 partners, some of whom focused on sort of like proximity. So you could move a little tiny, very simple, not that interesting avatar around a graphic environment. And then as other people moved their little avatars around, they came into view on the screen. And so the idea was just like a party, like you don't all stay in the living room. You move from the kitchen to the porch to whatever. So whoever moved themselves near you was who you were going to engage with. Compared to, you know, the full-on VR Oculus headset, fly through the air, go and see an artwork just like it was, you know, so we had very, very sophisticated and very simple. There was a group from the UK that did these, it was really like just a 2D Zoom hopping map where you just chose a thing, but what was happening in the Zoom rooms was like they had a hot tub party, which was, you know, everybody in their bathtubs and a guy, you know, shaving his legs with fishnets on. And so, you know, like it wasn't, the technology wasn't that advanced, but the thinking about the experience was. So there was that. And then finally, we decided to burn the man. And we did that. And one of the things that I didn't get to in my talk that I meant to mention around succession planning is also legacy. So Burning Man in 2016 acquired 3,800 acres of high desert land, which is partly, you know, playa like Black Rock Desert, but partly wetlands. And so because we had access to this private space, we were able to burn and to virtually stream the man. And then finally, you know, we were able to redeploy our teams. We retained the majority of our staff. There was a big fundraising effort around institutional capacity and sort of continuity and making sure that we didn't lose everybody for the institutional knowledge, but also for the sense of that we are a community together. So we're very fortunate that our CEO and our Chief Operating Officer and our philanthropic engagement team, along with the board, were very committed to raising the money that made it possible for people to continue to work. And I said finally about that, but I will say the other lasting thing is that we're a distributed workforce now, and we were not before. And so we have many more people in many more places who work for Burning Man, even while our headquarters are still in San Francisco. I probably need to give shorter answers to questions.
No, it's
but
fantastic.
Yeah.
No, please don't. It's fantastic. It's very interesting you mention South by Southwest, because many Irish musicians were preparing to go there, and I think that was the first kind of brutal impact of COVID in Ireland. You know, that just that startling finish that you know can't go anywhere and shut down, followed quickly. So, but that's amazing how you managed to do that, to have that access to, what did you say, 3,400 acres. I mean, that's just extraordinary stuff. Yeah.
Yes, and what we're doing there is prototyping art and engineering strategies with the Land Art Generator Initiative that began a few years ago to look at sustainable interventions from everything from farming to power to, you know, land sustainability, so we can really learn together for the future of sustainability on the land.
Brilliant, thank you. Have we've more questions down here in the front, I think.
Question here.
Okay, great.
How you doing? Thank you very much for the talk. Dahi Kelly is my name. I'm one of the organisers of an independent festival here in Galway, Éilú le Grá.
We can't see you yet, Donald, do you mind? Oh yeah, there you are. Thank you.
So yeah, I actually lived in San Francisco for 7 years, so this year will be my 8th burn at Black Rock City. And again, it has just had such an impact on me in terms of my life. Again, the culture that's instilled, the community that it breeds, and again, just being out there, it's something that I felt a calling to bring some of that ethos back here, and that's what kind of a lot of where the core values of our festival come from. But my question to you is just on the culture and the principles. You know, I've experienced it firsthand, the impact it has on people and how it's embraced in terms of force, it's embraced and people kind of express it in their own means. What are kind of the strategy and tactics that you use in the org to kind of instill the culture and the principles on site?
Wow. One, I would say it's people like you who hold that, right? Like there is no way that central command can be like, okay, y'all gonna behave like this. Like it just, it's really not going to happen. The source has to come from within. And there are, I think, a few strategies that we do use. One comes from what I was talking about today around ritual and really thoughtful taking care of each other. We use appreciations at the end of a meeting, and anyone can opt in to say something in gratitude to some other team member for what they have done. We are big on food, right? We have a Tuesday lunch as a team. We have a Thursday afternoon high tea. We make sure that the meetings for our volunteers, that our office hours, we start later in the day because we know we will end later in the day, so we can make ourselves available to people who are volunteering and can only be with us in the evening. We've also been trying to do letters from our event director, Charlie Dolman, that go out to the public at large, that reinforce the kind of culture that we hold collectively and its importance and how to think about that. The map, which I mentioned, reinforcing this idea of matter out of place and playa restoration. I think it's a lot in setting ritual and convention and tradition that continually reinforces that. And then we have about 35% of the population is new each year. We for sure saw a falling off of civility last year when we first came back. There were a lot of people who felt like, wait a second, did everybody forget how to be kind to each other? And we've been thinking about that, talking about that, and trying to support maybe being a little more contained, a little smaller, theme camps having 100 people instead of 200 people, that kind of thing, so that the intimacy of direct relationship can support the furtherance of the culture. But it's a good question, it's a big question, and it's top of mind for sure.
Great, thank you. I think down here there certainly were a few questions.
Hi, is that work? Oh, yeah. Lovely to meet you. My name is Vanessa Earle, and I'm a theatre artist and change maker, and just recently created an immersive ritual called Salt, which took place here in Galway to honour the sea and our connection to it. And it was driven by swimmers and dippers' personal stories that I gathered during the pandemic. That's where it started. Thank you so much for coming. I've absolutely loved every word you said. It's been so helpful and inspiring. My question for you is, who looks after you? I'm noticing your amazing leadership, and I'm just wondering, who's your support? Who looks after you?
Well, invite me back next year. No. I think it's an important question, and I'm going to generalize it a little bit to say that I think that how we resource ourselves and each other is actually very critical to the work. And a number of years ago, when we were setting staff and team goals, I set a goal for my team for the year to be mindful about our well-being. And so I think you're raising something that is just essential to the work that we do together, and how we hold each other and support each other and make it possible to tell the truth about where we are and how we feel. And thank you for that little bit of ripple of clap. For myself, I do think about how to resource myself, and I work with a number of personal support people over time as I can afford. You know, and most of my life I haven't made enough money to afford anything, because I was always working very low to the ground and in the field as an artist with artists and with community educators and youth. In more recent years, I have been able to afford a little more direct sort of things like body work, and I've in the last 2.5 years I've been working with a somatic coach, and in particular looking at the relationship between breath and body and self-knowledge from within my body. I had a long trauma history, so I did a very deep work in the 90s around that, and I'm acutely aware that my body is signaling me all the time about how I am and am not doing. I also have come to understand myself as an empathic person, and so what does it mean to hold boundaries energetically? And you know, I was when I write in my journal at night, which I do journal and I meditate, one of the things is I was asked to join someone for breakfast this morning, which sounded delightful, but I knew I had to be boundaried around that, because in order to come here and to be here with you, to be stimulated by conversation this morning was not going to be constructive for what I needed to do. And so, and it's funny because Maureen nodded her head when I said that, as if she knew exactly why and what I was choosing. So learning, actually, one of the ways in which I take care of myself is learning that disappointing other people's expectations in order to fulfill the larger expectation is absolutely acceptable. And so giving myself permission to have those limits. And I'm going to go a little bit longer. I was like trying to do concise answers, but you know, I feel like this is such an important topic and not one that we necessarily talk about that much. And so, you know, the other thing for me is that, as it turns out, I am more or less an introvert, mostly. I'd rather read a book, I'd rather stay in bed, I'd rather, you know, pull up a blanket on the couch kind of thing. I'd rather have a small, intimate dinner for no more than 12 people than a large party. Like, what the hell? I'm, you know, producing things in the largest of ways, and not just Burning Man. I was the president of the Arts Council for the city of New Orleans, and there's a party if there ever was one, right? And this is also part of why I said, I know that we protect ourselves somewhat by being producers, and we're not as much in the thick of it in a way. And what I know is that I can become overstimulated as well. And so, like, wow, being able to own and honor that and to step away and be more reclusive is so important to my ability to fulfill the larger set of objectives about which I am passionate. And so resourcing myself, whatever that means for you or for anybody else, I may have my set of ways in which I do that, but to know it and to understand it and to take care of our bodies and our souls, our minds, our hearts is really, really important to the sustainability of anything that we do. And the last thing I'll say on that subject is I have long held a phrase which I say that the work should serve the worker, not only the worker serving the work. And so in terms of managing teams, my attention to how the work that they are doing is serving them is crucial to the way that I approach managing people. And I suggest that we all might do well to own that, to do that, and to honor the growth and development of those that we're responsible for.
That's terrific. Thank you for taking the extra time with that.
I know there are some questions from the house. I also know we have 7 minutes before it's time to feed people, and you had some questions. So,
well, thank you, Vanessa, for that great question. Maybe there's another question from the house, because I did see a few hands up, and I don't want to deprive anybody.
And I'm here. There's a way to be funny about this, but you know, you can find me. You know, so a couple of things. I'll just do this right now. I am here through the conference, and so notwithstanding what I said about becoming overstimulated and sometimes being reclusive, my intention is to make myself available. And I won't remember your name, so I'll ask you more than once what your name is. I'm sorry. I'll be taking in mostly your energy and who you are, and the name will slide right off my brain. And if you want to email me, my email is kim.cook, C-O-O-K, no E on the end, @burningman.org. So there are many, many ways to be in touch with me if in fact you had a question and didn't get a chance to ask it.
That's really generous of you. Thank you so much, Kim. So we'll take one final question. I see somebody here in the middle. Yeah.
Sorry to the pressure because it's the last question. My name is Sinead Dunphy. I run my own company, Eventi Management, but we specialise in arts and festivals as a general, but I'm also director of Imagine Arts Festival in Waterford and Summersing Children's Arts Festival in Cork. Because I have no boundaries and I have no sense of self-care, clearly. Also, if anyone wants to get in touch about Imagine, please come forward with great ideas. Because I'm only in the job 3 weeks, and my question relates to pretty much the innovations that have come during your time, Kim, with Burning Man, but also even the way you were able to move through your own career within that space. And the question really is just, do you have any advice on inspiring new rituals, new traditions within a festival that I suppose already has a history, but has been run by volunteers, which kind of have such an ephemeral presence that it feels almost like, even though Imagine its 22nd year, it feels almost like a brand new project. And for me, I want to serve the festival, but I want to serve the city of Waterford, and I want to serve the artists. And it feels now in the role that there's quite a mammoth task there when the festival's on in October. So I'd welcome your advice, or if you have any tips, or how do you go about looking at that and creating new rituals, new traditions for something that's already in place?
Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. I am so enamored of the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. It's the most powerful awareness that I have, probably, and it allows me to be humble and to submit to the room, whatever the room is, the question that I have. So if I were you and I was thinking about this 22-year history and the moment that I was in and the desire to do new rituals and traditions, first I would ask myself, to what end, right? There's no point in doing it just because it seems like a good idea, but what are the feelings I'm trying to evoke, the changes or shifts I'm trying to make? What is impelling me? What is propelling me? What is compelling me? What is bringing forth this sense or this notion that needs to happen? And then I would bring people together and put that honestly on the table, vulnerably on the table. These are the things I'd like to address. These are the things that I think we need new rituals and traditions for. If you were me, how might we go about that? For sure, I would let yourself not have to own it and instigate all of it, but rather shape the space for it to come forward. And some things you'll find you're inspired to do. I started something with my team that I called I See You, and people randomly paired up and took a name from a hat, and for a week they just observed whoever's name they got. And then we sat in a room and we looked at each other and said, Maureen, I see you. I see that you are sensitive. I see that you are kind. I see that you are supportive of the others around you. And these are things I've just seen about her in the last 24 hours. And we did that for each other. And that sort of like just the grounding and the awareness of seeing and being seen was just a new tradition that we made up. And then the introvert in the room said she didn't really like it. And so then we modified it. What about you? We have 2 minutes. You must...
Well, what all I want to do is to say thank you to you, because that was just absolutely inspiring. I think you've given us a whole new lexicon for the next day or so. I know like what you've said is just going to spill into everything that everybody thinks about over the sessions. So, and vulnerability and care and imagination. I mean, it's really kind of jaw-dropping stuff. So I want to say a huge thank you to you for giving so generously and so openly to us this morning. And you're going to be deluged with emails, I'm going to tell you that, Kim, and you're going to be deluged with people coming at you, but that kindness and openness, I mean, it's writing the book on what festival making should be, so thank you so, so much. Can we give it up once more for Kim?
Wait. Just to say, also, Teresia, thank you, Teresia. Yes.